Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and today we've got an awesome entrepreneur who I think is such a good example of realizing the pain that we may go through in certain elements of life and within the things that we experience in life. Those also give us value to help others go through that journey as well. And it also means that we can charge for it because we become an expert by going through these different things in life. So let me tell you about today's expert. Her name is Arlette Bolduc. She is an independent educational consultant. She works with students and their families as the students are applying to college. Now, Arlette's story is really cool because she grew up in a house on the border. Her kitchen was in Canada and her living room in the United States. I so love that. As someone who grew up in Boston and drove to Montreal all the time, I think it's such a cool ingredient of geography. Arlette was born in Vermont of French-Canadian parents, and although she was educated in French in Quebec schools, she grew up bilingual and ended up going to Harvard for her undergrad. So there's that Boston connection for all of you listeners. She then obtained her law degree from Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. She was a civil litigator for over 20 years. None of this has anything to do with her business, which is why I love her story so much, because when her son and stepson were starting the college application process, she realized what a full-time job that was going to be and how different applying to college was in 2011 from when she applied. So she saw a need, feeling the overwhelm herself, and she decided that she wanted to offer a solution. She then earned her college counseling certificate from UCLA in 2012 and founded her company, Grays Hall College Counseling. Such a cool journey. We're going to hear all about it in today's episode. So let's dive straight into my interview with Arlette Bolduc. All right, Arlette, I am so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. I'm really excited too. Wow, you made me sound so good.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll admit to you here on the air, I had a good time doing your intro. I think you have such a cool story. And I love the fact that it's totally nonlinear, which is such a theme in so many of our interviews here on this show. But let's hear it from your perspective, because it for sure is that nonlinear path. How the heck did you start doing all these awesome things that you're doing?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, like I was saying, when I was a litigator for over 20 years and I enjoyed it, but I started to feel like I really wasn't giving the people help. So suddenly my son and stepson were applying to college at the same time, and wow, it was overwhelming. They're two very different people and they were looking at very different programs and schools. And I was like, how are they going to deal with this? And how do parents deal with this? Me, I was freaking out. So I went through the process with them and I realized, you know what, I think there might be a career in this. And I was ready for a change. I mean, I still have my bar card. I still practice law, like volunteer when I have time. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to have something a little bit more immediate. I wanted to help people, and I knew the pain they were going through. So that's sort of how that journey started.
Yeah, I love that. I love when businesses start from us scratching our own itches. It's something that's so common in so many great entrepreneurial stories. But Arlette, there is a bridge still to be crossed from one going through that pain and solving their own problems and then saying, I'm going to help others solve this. What was it about that experience that made you say, you know what, not only is this something I'm doing, but you said it in your own words, there's a career here. What sparks that?
You know, just looking things up online and realizing that, well, first of all, when I found the college counseling certificate program at UCLA, I'm like, yay, I get to go back to school. I mean, I love school, I love education. So I realized through this, just doing the research and finding out about this certificate program, that people do this. They do this for a living. I'm like, that sounds good. So I did it. I mean, I didn't take the leap immediately. I was still practicing law, and my daughter and stepdaughter, see, the boys are the same age and the girls are the same age. It's kind of weird, but you know, it is what it is. But when the girls were starting their college process, I wanted to help out and really reach out to, my daughter was in drill team, and I was really involved with the other drill moms. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this for free for all the kids that are on drill. Whoever wants to work with me, and, I'll help you with this whole college process. And, that's kind of how I got started. And it just grew from there. Word of mouth, honestly, word of mouth. Yeah. Parents do talk to other parents.
Yeah, it's something that we hear so frequently, is that word of mouth, especially at the beginning. And for you, I think it's fascinating because you had a really well accomplished career. You did a field that takes a lot of practice. Literally, that's why we call it practicing law. And part of that, I wonder, because obviously starting that business and getting your first client, those are all things that scare a lot of people away from ever becoming an entrepreneur. It's why we have the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. What was your psyche? Were you just like, no, I'm going to go get a client, this is going to be no problem? Or what was that first client story?
Well, my practice clients, even that was a little scary, right? But my first paying client, I was a nervous wreck, I have to say. And in the beginning, I used to go to their house. I was like a traveling college counselor. And I just remember sitting in my car outside that house going, I really don't know what I'm doing. Do I? Yeah, I do. I kept trying to convince myself. And as a litigator, I was kind of used to thinking on the fly and, answering questions that I wasn't always prepared for. So I figured I can do this. And you know what? I'm human. They're human. We'll figure it out. So, my first paying client, and then it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I love that. I also love that you immediately, when I asked that question, you immediately differentiated between your trial clients and your paying clients. What was that process like? How many trial clients were there?
Well, I actually was an independent contractor with a law firm in Long Beach, and they were not exactly my clients, but so I was just paid, for the work that I did. But I had been with the partner of the firm forever and ever and ever, and so I was always one step removed from, they didn't pay me directly. My friend, the partner, paid me. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. It clarifies for me, and especially a lot of listeners I know, that it's one question we always get, like, should I take some clients on for free? So when I heard trial clients, my head went there, but you actually meant like trial from a law perspective clients.
Actually, yeah, I did. And I do both.
Awesome. Yeah.
With the drill team, they were my trial, my practice clients. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the blending of the two between law and your entrepreneurial journey, I think, is super valuable for us to gain insights to, because when we talk about law, obviously that's something that we know, the world of law and how those types of rates can go. Obviously, hourly rates, retainers, there's so many options there. But walk us through becoming your own entrepreneur, helping people with college counseling. Where did you start from a pricing perspective there? Because obviously it's changed along the years, and you don't have to throw numbers out there, but did you start low and then gain that confidence, or how did you navigate those waters?
Well, I definitely started low. I priced out, or I looked at other people who do what I do in various areas, including here. I think that makes sense. There are some regional differences for sure. And I didn't want to obviously be at the top, because I didn't feel like, I wasn't quite ready for that. But I'll be honest with you, the one thing I really didn't want to do was start off with an hourly situation. I was billing by 6-minute increments for over, 15, 20 years. I really did not want to keep track of time in that sense anymore. So I started off with basically I called it a total package at the time. So it's now called my custom fit package. But I started off with, for one fee, this is what we'll do. We'll meet as often as we need to. I will review everything that you need me to review. I just did not want to keep track of all my minutes.
Yes, I can very much appreciate that. And I'm sure a lot of listeners are saying, Arlette, thank you for those insights, because that is not the thing that I want to do. So I'm glad that you've aired that to us, is that that's something that we don't have to do. Listeners, you hear from Arlette, someone who's been in that industry for decades, who chose not to use that route in her own business. It's something that we have that choice. We have that ability. And Arlette, when I think about your business, both from what you actually do as a subject matter expert, as well as your business of just growing a business that we all experience, I keep coming back to that word process. Obviously, when you talk about college recruiting, that is a process that you guide people through. When you talk about growing your business, there are different processes that help you. Word of mouth is one of those key parts of the flywheel. How do you think about process in your business? Is it something that you've been refining since you ever started? I mean, obviously you went through it as a parent yourself, but how has that evolved over the years?
Well, I was really lucky to find a platform that was created specifically for IECs, for what I do. It was in fact created by a husband of a wife who was doing this, and he kept watching her going, oh dear God, you need some help. You need some computer help. And that really helped me, have a good process right at the get-go. I mean, I still use them. So the next step, though, was to, figure out what other products can I do? What else can I do to help people? So recently, I went from just the one-on-one to maybe a group coaching situation where, since the pandemic, and even actually before the pandemic, I stopped going to people's houses. It got to the point where I was running into myself in the South Bay, It's like, wow, really? And when your clients are high school students, oh, I'm still at practice, I'm not there, or I just got it to be a situation where online was better. So that was another step in the process of I could be more efficient. Sometimes my meetings were an hour, sometimes they were 25 minutes. That way I could keep working in between the meetings and not be driving like crazy trying to make the next meeting.
Yeah.
I hope that kind of helps.
Yeah, for sure, because it really helps. And I think part of the important takeaways that we're all going to gain and glean from your own entrepreneurial experience is that evolution. I think it's so important. Your entire business evolved from you going through this journey yourself. And I think it's such a powerful message for all the entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs out there. Speaking of which, one strategy or one part of business education that I probably didn't understand when I was 19, when I started my first business, was who our customers are. And you talk about, you're interacting with high school students who have extracurricular activities, after school sports, so much that goes into it. But a lot of us have been through the college recruiting process. And I remember I wanted nothing to do with it, Arlette. My dad handled so much of it, and I'm super appreciative for that. What is that balance for you from a business perspective of serving the parents, the ones who are on top of these things, versus serving the kids who are the ones that it's really going to impact?
Right. Well, I always tell people during an initial consultation, I need to talk to you, the parents, but I also want the student there. They need to buy into this whole process. Without them doing the work, it's not going to get done. So I really try to make sure that the students buy into the whole process. I even have them sign the contract. I know they're not 18, but I want them to, appreciate what it is that they're going to be expected to do and understand that and be participating in it. I keep the parents. It's funny. I have various family dynamics, right? Of course. I had one mom. I love this one. She just found out about me. I came to their house. I met her daughter. She wrote me a check for the full amount. She goes, this is the last time you're going to see me. She's great. She can handle it. I'm out. I just don't want to deal with this at all. So there's that kind of parent. And then there's the other parents that want to kind of be a little bit more involved and informed. But, my main client is obviously both, right? I've got to make sure that the student wants to do this process and participate in it. And I keep reminding them, this is for you. This is all about you and your next 4 years, wherever it is that you go. So what you put in, you're going to get back. And then, of course, the parents who want to make sure that they do everything they can to help their student, that they give them every opportunity, that they understand a little bit, depending on how the level that they want to be involved, what the process is and what they can do to help. They just don't want to be the naggers. They're done being the naggers. That's my job.
Yeah, I love that. I also think, Arlette, that makes you uniquely positioned to speak on the topic of client engagement. Because when I think about, I've worked with so many different clients, a lot of marketing projects, and I always think about, this client's not getting back to me with these files or these branding assets that I need. Arlette, you are, as you said, the nagger. You are getting high school kids to get you the stuff that you need, and you're looking for them to engage with you. What are some of those engagement tricks that you've got up your sleeves?
Oh my God. I don't know that I have any tricks really. I think to some degree, having someone outside the family unit helping a student go through this, I have street cred, I guess. And I remind them, I had my own kids go through this process. I helped them. I went through this process eons ago. And I just keep telling them that it's for them, and sometimes I have to get the parents involved, but generally speaking, we develop a good relationship, with my one-on-one clients, obviously, and even with the group, that they kind of want to do it for me too, in a way. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Because I like the emphasis that you put on, which is really the trick that I'm hearing up your sleeve is the strong emphasis that this is for you. I'm not here for my own entertainment. I'm here for your future. And I think that's really key. I'm super curious because I love the evolution of your business to now include those group sessions. What sparked that decision? Was it a cost-based decision of saying, I want to make this more accessible for more kids and families? Or is there a different dynamic to that group setting that you think works really well as part of this process?
Yeah, I think it's both of those things. I'm obviously in a position where I'd like to keep scaling my business a little bit more. And I feel, when I do have a one-on-one client, yes, it is the pricier of the options, and it is a lot of, work. With the group, I can help more people with a lot fewer meetings, right? I don't have to keep saying the same thing 10 times. I can say it the one time and everybody gets the help because everything is recorded. They can go back. They can ask me questions. And it is a little bit more accessible. I am currently working on an online course that will be just basically a do-it-yourself of what I do to make it even more affordable for families. And that may be something that I end up, giving away to certain school districts or whatever. I haven't really quite decided yet. But my whole point is I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity. And, I think about my own experience and, my parents didn't even graduate from high school, and I was bound and determined to get out of that town and go to a good school. And I want everybody else to get that opportunity as well.
Yeah, I love how much you're driven by the impact of the work that you do, obviously having gone through it yourself, having gone through it with your own children. And I think that's a really powerful message. It's really on display for us here in today's conversation of that evolutionary process, not only with our businesses, but you've been adjusting to the actual process of your subject matter for as long as you've been doing it. And along those lines, while we've got you here, so many of our listeners are parents, and a lot of them either are currently going through the college admissions process with their children, or they're for sure going to one day. Arlette, with that hat on, before we transition to your entrepreneurial hat, with that hat on, what are some of those big shifts and changes and evolutions that you've seen along the way within your industry?
Well, certainly the competitiveness of the admission rates are ridiculously low. Stanford's at 3%, Harvard's hovering around 3 or 4. It's just gotten so competitive out there that the parents are just demoralized, honestly. They just don't know what chance. They look at their student who's killing themselves, taking every AP class they possibly can. They are doing so many extracurricular activities. They literally don't sleep. And yet they may or may not be able to get into UCLA. It's just, So I try to help them understand that there's more than those 5 schools out there, right? So I try to help them see that there are going to be options. And at the end of this, I tell all my families, look, my goal is for you and the student, your student, to have options at the end of this. And there are schools that they would be more than happy to attend. So I try to broaden their horizons, look at some other programs and look at some other schools too. At the end of the day, it's what you do with the opportunities that you have at the school that you are at. It really makes a big difference if you have that attitude.
Yeah. And along those lines, actually, I think those crazy acceptance rates, those are wild since when I was applying to school. But I think that those really illustrate that part of what you do, Arlette. I view you as a personal branding specialist. You're really helping these students to put themselves in the best light possible. What are some of those insights? Because I think that there's going to be a lot of crossover into business. How can we position ourselves to get into a school, to look in the best light for prospective customers and clients? I'd love to hear some of those tricks up your sleeves, because you for sure have some tricks there.
Maybe. So, when a student's looking to see how to try to build their college list, I show them how to, deep dive, investigate the college. So you want to make sure that the schools that you end up on your list are schools that you could see yourself really flourishing at. And if there are, once they have those kinds of schools, then I encourage them to make contact. Go on the admission page, look for your local, admission counselor or admission rep, and, ask some questions, contact a professor in the department that you might be majoring in. And just, if you've got some questions, ask them. Let them know that you're checking them out just as much as, it's important that they know that they also have to sell themselves to you. In terms of extracurriculars and all of that, I really look at each student as an individual student. I don't package them into these little machines that can then, be admitted to 1 or 2 of the Ivies, right? Of course I have kids that have been admitted, but the point being is you want to try to just kind of think about what is it that you're passionate about. And let's think of maybe some things to do outside the box that would show your deep involvement in whatever it is that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because right there in your answer, it really revealed the individuality. And when we talk about the power of personal branding in college admissions or in business, it really is that differentiation of, hey, this is me. This is not me trying to fit into a box of who I think you want to work with or who I think you want to admit, but this is me really at my core. And I love those insights from you, Arlette. It's funny, the more we talk about college admissions, the more I see those parallels into business of figuring out, even making your list of schools that you want to apply to. That's just figuring out your target market. Who's the right fit for you? And I think this is a fun question for me to ask. I don't ask it often from guests, but I think that you have that entrepreneur hat that you wear, but you also have your subject matter hat on. Where do you see those parallels? What are some lessons either from business that apply into college admissions or vice versa?
That's a tough question. I guess it would just be that with anything, you just have to listen. It's really important to listen and be aware of what's happening out there. What are some of the needs? I experienced them, and then I realized, well, if I'm going through this, other people are going through this, and how can I make it better? How can I fix that? In a way, it's like that with my students. Some of them come in and go, I'm a horrible test taker. I don't know what to do, and I have a 2.8. Can you help me? And of course I can. And I listen to them. I talk to them. I get to know them. And we just make sure that list is targeted for, for potential, right? So there's going to be some selectives, there's going to be some less, some more likelies, but I try to listen. I think that's the most important thing, is kind of be aware.
Yeah, I love that strategic advice universally for entrepreneurs and for entrepreneurs. I think that message is so important. And the other thing that I heard in there, Arlette, is you're also part psychologist in your line of duties because, as you said, students have these narratives in their minds. And I feel this way from an entrepreneurial perspective when our listeners email me and they say, oh, similar to I'm not a great test taker, they'll say, oh, I'm terrible at sales. How much of what you do is navigating those mindset barriers? Because you're a fellow entrepreneur, you're one of us. You also experience those in your own head. How do either you personally navigate those or with the students that you serve, how do you help them navigate those mindset things that they run into?
Well, again, it's hard for me to say. It really just has to do with looking for the positives in specifically with a student, for example. Sure, you may not be the best test taker, but that doesn't mean that you can't submit a very strong application otherwise. So we look for solutions. We look for things that they can do or they can work on, or in order to make their self-esteem actually get better. I mean, if they feel a little bit more confident about their chances, that shines through. In terms of, for me, I think my biggest lesson was done is better than perfect. And that was really hard for me. Like, I would put something together and I would look it over and look it over and look it over. And I couldn't get it out, right? It could be a program, it could be a webinar, it could be anything. And, at the end of the day, you just got to give it your best shot and go for it and then learn from whatever happens.
Yeah, I love that advice. You said that it might be hard for you to explain that one, but I think you absolutely nailed it because these are the things that are going to speak to all of us as we go through our own journeys, especially that perfectionism. Arlette, knowing you, even the little that I already do, it's obviously you have very high standards of yourself. And I think it's so important that we all hear it from a real life entrepreneur that these are things that you've broken through. With that in mind, obviously you've been at this for a while. You've helped so many students in their own journeys. What's something that you know now that looking back in your earlier days as an entrepreneur, you're realizing, holy cow, I wish I knew that sooner. Or maybe, I could have accelerated my progress or my journey if I just did this instead. Because I love that fact that you're so generously sharing with us your growth roadmap, hearing about you're going to be launching an online course. In the past few years, you've launched online group programs. Obviously, that's an evolution. What's one thing looking backwards for all those entrepreneurs that you're saying, gosh, I wish I knew that sooner?
Honestly, I wish I had started, kind of digging around a little bit sooner on, how to scale the business, how to make it more accessible to more people. Really.
Yeah. That's a powerful one. Arlette, it's one of our founding principles here of the show is that Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. So I think that's a really powerful reminder for all of our listeners. With that in mind, what is your process for looking forward? Because you're in an industry that's always changing. And you've talked to us a little bit from a business perspective about your growth plans, but how do you view the future? Is it a time horizon that you're looking at? Are there more macro trends within the college recruiting process that you keep your eye on? How do you stay on top of those trends and really plan for the next cycle of whatever your industry brings your way?
I mean, for me, for my industry, we have a few associations, and one of them in particular, HECA, it's the higher education. I can't even remember. It's an acronym, but there's a listserv, and we share information constantly amongst each other. There's, for right now, everyone's scared about, what's going to happen with the test optional policy that was established, as a result or to deal with COVID. A lot of schools have decided to stay test optional, and every year they ask me the same question: do you think it's still going to be? And there's a few schools that have decided to, start requiring testing. So, I mean, all of these things you have to kind of stay on top of, right? So we have communities of people of IECs who chat and talk and share, tons of information. I'm always on a webinar at some point. I'm, reaching out to admissions officers, just finding out what's the scoop, what's going on. I mean, there's a pulse that you just have to stay on top of. And something's kind of got to give, with these high, these low admission rates. So I just don't really quite know what that is going to be. But in the meantime, I try to help, all the families and the students know that there are some options for them, lots of them.
Yeah, I love those insights. I always say success leaves clues. Listeners, you're seeing from Arlette some of these real life outlets that she keeps her finger on the pulse of, whether it's networking groups, whether it's talking to the real life people within the admissions offices. These are things that Arlette takes seriously from her own strategic business perspective. So we can all apply this into our own industries, our own businesses. I love these insights, Arlette, and I'm really appreciative that you're sharing these with us. I do want to ask you this strategic question for some of the listeners who this may apply to, or just to hear your thought process to go along with this. What's the ideal timeline for you to get in front of those students? Are we talking about sophomores, juniors? I also feel very far removed from this, so I'm curious about the cyclical nature of your business.
Right. Well, initially, I was definitely working more with kids that were right on the cusp of applying, right? So the summer before their senior year. And, but to me, the ideal time to start working with me in a one-on-one situation in particular would be either as a rising junior, the summer before your junior year or into the junior year. That's ideal. But the group coaching is really meant for the seniors who are, the second semester juniors who are starting that whole process at that point. So, but I also have what I call touch point meetings that I offer for, freshmen, sophomore who have questions. How do I, prepare? What should I be doing? What classes should I be taking? So I do give them the hourly, fee for that.
Yeah, I love those insights, though, because listeners, here's Arlette showing us that she can rattle these questions off that they're likely to ask at the beginning part of their process. Why? Because she was a parent that went through this. So I think a lot of times we discount our own experiences in life with our children and our careers, and we don't let that guide the way. But Arlette, here today, we've seen so many times that you've just let those personal experiences guide the way in your strategic business decisions. So I love those insights. Now I'm going to put you on the spot. It's my favorite part of every episode. It's the hardest one for the guests, and I just get to take a step back. We talked about so many great things today. Honestly, the strategic insights that you gave us that come I'm going to say the word naturally. I don't like that word because it actually comes from somewhere, whether it's reps or in your case, it comes from that personal experience and also you continuing to invest in those associations and professional networks. But with so many great things that you've shared with us here today, what's that one takeaway? Speaking directly to the entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs out there who are listening, what's that one thing that you hope they walk away from today's episode with and say, you know what? Arlette encouraged me and I'm going to go do that in my own business.
Don't be afraid to turn your pain into a solution, honestly. Because if you went through it, someone else has gone through it too.
Absolutely. Really good advice there. And entrepreneurs, this is one of those ways, not only entrepreneurs, but wantrepreneurs. This is one of those ways that we can get outside of our own heads, is make it about the people we're meant to serve because they have that pain. How do we know that? Because we've gone through that pain. Arlette, your entire business is such a good shining example of that in action. So I so respect and admire that about you. With that in mind, I know that listeners are going to be keen to learn more about you, the way that you work, your awesome business, Grays Hall College Counseling. Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here to go deeper into your work?
Definitely come to my website at grayshallcounseling.com. I am on Instagram, Facebook as well with Grace Hall. And by the way, Grace Hall was my freshman dorm at Harvard. And it's not trademarked.
I almost asked you about that, but in my head I was like, it feels silly because could probably guess that. So that where I went to school outside of Boston, we had the Harvard shuttle that dropped us off at Harvard Square, so we could take the red line into the city. So yeah, I love that you stuck to those roots, Arlette, and it's such a core part of your brand. Listeners, you already know the drill. We are dropping all of those links down below in the show notes wherever it is that you're tuning in. Arlette's business website is grayshallcounseling.com. That's Gray with an A, not an E. So grayshallcounseling.com. You'll find that link down below. We're also linking to Arlette's personal LinkedIn if you want to reach out to her and just thank her for coming on the show today. Or if you're a parent and you desperately need her services, hit those links down below. Otherwise, Arlette, thank you so much for being so generous with all of your time, experience, and knowledge here today on the show with us.
Ça m'a fait plaisir. It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.